Kevin's smile tightened. "I don't know if I'd call it neutrality," he said carefully. "I pick my moments. I'm an actor, not a full-time political commentator." Joy raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "But you have a platform," she pressed. "Millions of people listen to you. Silence can send a message too." The audience murmured softly, that low hum that meant something uncomfortable had just entered the conversation. Kevin shifted in his chair, crossing one ankle over the other, buying himself a second to breathe. He had done thousands of interviews over 4 decades, faced tough critics, skeptical journalists, even hostile crowds. Still, something about the tone in the room felt different, less curious, more confrontational. "I don't think silence is always what people think it is," Kevin replied. "Sometimes it's reflection. Sometimes it's choosing to speak through work instead of sound bites." Sonny Hostin leaned in slightly, sensing the tension but not interrupting. Whoopi Goldberg watched quietly, her expression unreadable. Joy, however, wasn't done. "But don't you worry," Joy continued, "that by not taking a clear stance, you're letting other voices, louder, angrier ones, fill the space." Kevin let out a slow breath through his nose. His fingers tapped once against his knee, a small, unconscious tell. "I worry about a lot of things," he said. "I worry about oversimplifying complicated issues. I worry about turning every conversation into a battlefield where nuance goes to die." A ripple of applause broke out from part of the audience. Kevin nodded politely in acknowledgement, but Joy's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're saying," she said, voice sharpening just a touch, "that people who do speak out are oversimplifying." Kevin's head snapped slightly toward her, not aggressively, but with sudden focus. "No," he said firmly. "I'm saying I don't want to do that. That's my choice. Everyone gets to decide how they engage." The air felt thick now, as if the studio itself were holding its breath. Kevin could feel the warmth of the lights on his face, the weight of eyes on him from every direction. He reminded himself to stay calm, to keep his voice even. Still, a faint heat began to rise in his chest, the familiar burn of being misunderstood. Joy laughed, but there was little humor in it. "Come on, Kevin. You've played activists, rebels, truth-tellers. Are you braver on screen than in real life?" That did it. Not an explosion, at least not yet, but something inside Kevin shifted, like a switch being flipped. His posture straightened. The polite half-smile vanished, replaced by a steady, unblinking seriousness. "That's not fair," he said, louder now, his voice cutting cleanly through the studio noise. "Playing a role is not the same as living a life. Acting is storytelling. Real life is messier." The audience fell silent. Kevin leaned forward slightly, elbows hovering near his knees. "You know what bravery looks like to me," he continued. "Listening, learning, admitting when you don't have all the answers. I've spent decades watching people turn complex human experiences into slogans, and it doesn't always help." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Kevin kept going, momentum building. "I've marched when I felt it mattered. I've donated when I could. I've supported causes quietly because not everything needs a press release. And I resent the idea that if you're not loud on a talk show, you're somehow absent or afraid." A sharp gasp came from somewhere in the audience. Sonny's eyes widened slightly. Whoopi shifted in her chair, sensing the segment slipping out of its usual rhythm. Joy folded her arms. "No one's calling you afraid," she said. "We're asking you to be accountable." Kevin let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Accountable to whom?" he shot back. "To the internet. To a soundbite culture that punishes you the second you say the wrong thing." He shook his head, frustration now clearly visible. "I've seen colleagues torn apart for speaking too quickly, for choosing the wrong words, for not being perfect. And I've seen others criticized for staying quiet. It's a no-win game." The studio was utterly still. Even the cameras seemed to pause, lingering on Kevin's face as his emotions edged closer to the surface. His voice softened slightly, but the intensity remained. "I believe in responsibility," he said. "But I don't believe in performative outrage. And I won't pretend that being shouted at on television is the same thing as making real change." Joy leaned forward again, eyes locked on him. "So this conversation, is shouting at you?" Kevin met her gaze without flinching. "Right now, yes. It feels like I'm being put on trial for not fitting into a very specific mold of what you think speaking out should look like." A low murmur spread across the audience, divided reactions rippling through the room. Kevin could feel his heart pounding, but he didn't back down. Years of bottled frustration, watching debates turn toxic, nuance disappear, were spilling out faster than he'd planned. "I came here to talk about my work," he said, voice firm, almost trembling at the edges. "About stories that bring people together, that ask questions instead of screaming answers. And suddenly I'm defending my character." Joy opened her mouth again, but Whoopi finally raised a hand. "All right," she said calmly, stepping in. "Let's take a breath." Kevin leaned back slightly, chest rising and falling. The eruption hadn't been loud or chaotic, but it had been unmistakable, a controlled burn, intense and impossible to ignore. The easy, promotional interview was gone, replaced by something raw and unscripted. As the cameras rolled on, one thing was clear: this was no longer just another appearance. Whatever happened next, the moment had already carved itself into live television history.